Welcome to a deep dive into a topic that really flips the script on ancient Egypt.
Yeah, we're going way beyond pyramids and pharaohs here.
Exactly.
We're going to be uncovering how its legacy
Its essence, really.
was totally manipulated.
And misrepresented.
Misrepresented, yeah.
And get this, our source material is fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
We're using excerpts from something called pasted text.
Pasted text.
Compiled by a researcher named Sharri Plaza.
Oh, wow.
And it's like a treasure map.
Okay.
Leading us through all the tactics that were used to not just steal artifacts,
Right.
but to hijack a civilization's story.
It's amazing how they didn't just want to grab golden statues.
Right.
It was about stripping Egypt of its cultural capital.
Yeah.
Leaving this void, so they couldn't even understand their own past.
So the first layer of this is probably what you're already thinking about.
Yeah.
The straight up looting.
Just taking it.
Tombs ransacked, artifacts shipped off like souvenirs.
Like they were nothing.
But the scale of this is mind-boggling.
It is.
We're talking places like the Valley of the Kings.
Yeah.
Practically emptied out.
It's like, imagine if your family photo albums, your heirlooms, all ended up in somebody else's attic, and they told you the story of your family based on what they chose to see.
Yeah.
That's the level of disruption we're talking about here.
It's a powerful analogy, and here's the crazy thing.
What's that?
So many of these artifacts are still in foreign museums today.
Oh, it's true.
It raises all sorts of questions about, ownership versus rightful possession.
It's a huge topic, the world of cultural heritage. Like, who has the right to possess these things?
Exactly.
Should they be returned to their countries of origin?
Yeah.
These are debates that are happening right now.
Makes you wonder if just having something in your possession makes you the rightful owner.
Especially objects of such cultural significance.
And this leads us to an even deeper layer of appropriation.
Yeah.
Manipulating the narrative itself.
They didn't just want to own ancient Egypt. They wanted to control how the world saw it.
The pasted text document calls it cultural anti-scholarly theft.
Perfect way to put it.
Which is just...
It wasn't just about the objects.
Right.
It was about taking the power of interpretation.
So we're not just talking about physical objects here.
No.
We're talking about Kemet's history and identity being distorted.
One of the most glaring examples is that racial misrepresentation.
Okay.
Think about those classic images of ancient Egyptians that you've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Many were created by European artists who depicted them with European features.
It's like they were trying to erase the African identity of ancient Egypt.
And insert themselves into the story.
Yeah.
This subtle shift in visual representation served to reinforce the idea of European cultural superiority, furthering that distance from the African roots.
It's subtle, but it's so powerful.
It is.
It makes you realize how imagery can be used to manipulate perceptions.
Subconscious level.
On a subconscious level. And it wasn't just art, right? This control extended to academia as well.
European scholars dominated the field of Egyptology.
Right.
And often pushed aside or ignored how the Egyptians themselves understood their own history.
So they were basically saying, we'll tell you who you were and you better believe us.
Yeah, it was a silencing of indigenous voices on a huge scale.
It makes you wonder how much of what we consider common knowledge about ancient Egypt is actually filtered through this lens.
What if we stripped all of that away?
Yeah.
What will we find?
Yeah.
What stories are waiting to be rediscovered?
That's a perfect segue into the next layer of appropriation. The theft of knowledge and innovation.
Oh, yeah.
Prepare to have your mind blown, because we're talking about the misattribution of inventions and the downplaying of Kemet's intellectual achievement.
Totally. We often hear about the Greeks, being these pioneers of mathematics and philosophy.
Right.
But what if I told you that a lot of their discoveries were actually known in Kemet centuries before?
Okay, now you've got my attention.
Yeah.
Tell me more about these hidden intellectual treasures.
Okay.
What kind of things are we talking about here?
Well, let's talk about the Pythagorean theorem.
Go.
A squared plus b squared equals c squared.
Right, the hypotenuse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Egyptians were using that principle in their construction and land surveying way before Pythagoras.
So they had a sophisticated understanding of geometry way back then.
Oh, yeah. And it's not just math.
Okay.
They had a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, engineering, medicine.
It's incredible to think about the level of knowledge and innovation.
It really challenged that Eurocentric view.
Totally.
That credits the Greeks and Romans with all the advancements.
So it's not just about giving credit where credit is due.
Right.
It's about acknowledging the African roots of knowledge here.
and recognizing those contributions from civilizations beyond Europe.
It makes you think how different our understanding of history would be if we approached it with a more inclusive lens.
And speaking of lenses,
Right.
let's shift our focus to museums and how they play a role.
Yeah.
In these skewed perceptions, you walk into a grand hall filled with artifacts. You feel like you're stepping back in time. But what story are they telling?
That's a good point. Museums have so much power to shape how we understand the past.
Yeah.
But how are they contributing to this misrepresentation of ancient Egypt?
Think about how artifacts are displayed.
Okay.
Often the focus is on the exotic or mysterious, emphasizing the grandeur of pharaohs and tombs.
Right.
But while those are fascinating, it overshadows the everyday lives, the beliefs, the innovations of the people themselves.
So instead of seeing a complete picture of Kemetic society, we're getting like a curated, romanticized feel. Yeah. Does that tie back into that othering we were talking about?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's about presenting ancient Egypt as something other, something separate from its African context. And this feeds into the idea that it was somehow less sophisticated or less advanced than its European counterparts.
Exactly.
It's like we're being presented with this carefully constructed narrative to reinforce existing biases.
Instead of challenging them.
And then there's the issue of ownership and access.
Oh, yeah.
We touched on this earlier, with repatriation.
It's worth reiterating. Yeah. A lot of these artifacts were acquired through questionable means during the colonial era. And yet they remain in museums far from their place of origin.
It's as if these objects are being held hostage.
Yeah.
Preventing Egyptians from engaging with their own heritage.
Who has the right to possess and interpret these objects? Yeah. Should they be returned? Should museums share ownership?
Right. It raises all those questions.
It's these ongoing debates.
Right.
They go beyond legal arguments. They get into the heart of cultural identity and historical justice.
It's a reminder that the impact of colonialism is still felt today.
Oh, yeah. Not just in the physical objects.
But in the power structures that shape our access to knowledge and understanding.
And this brings us to another layer of appropriation that's often overlooked.
What's that?
The reinterpretation, or should I say misappropriation of religion.
Oh.
So we've talked about the theft of objects,
the
distortion of history, the misattribution of knowledge.
Yeah.
Now we're diving into the realm of the sacred.
European colonizers didn't just misinterpret Kemet's religion.
Right.
They actively tried to reshape it.
Wow.
To fit within their own belief systems.
So that sounds almost like a form of spiritual colonialism. Can you give me some specific examples of how this played out?
Well, take the Egyptian god Amun, for example.
Okay.
He was one of the most important deities in Kemet, representing creation and kingship.
Okay.
But during that Greco-Roman period, he was often merged with Zeus.
Oh, wow.
Becoming Zeus Ammon.
So they're taking these powerful ancient deities and trying to, like, squeeze them
into boxes that made sense to them.
Was this just a matter of misunderstanding?
It was a deliberate attempt to assimilate those Egyptian beliefs into the dominant Greco-Roman culture.
So it's not just about misunderstanding. Well, it's about power dynamics.
It's about power.
And asserting dominance over another culture's spiritual beliefs.
Exactly. And it wasn't limited to merging gods.
Okay.
Even symbols like the Ankh, which held deep spiritual meaning,
representing life,
eternal existence, were reinterpreted through a Christian lens.
So they stripped these symbols of their original meaning
and tried to fit them into their own religious framework.
It's like they were trying to erase the essence of Kemetic spirituality.
And replace it with something that aligned with their worldview.
It's incredible how these seemingly subtle acts of reinterpretation can have such a profound impact on a culture's spiritual identity.
It makes you think about those lasting consequences of these colonial interventions.
It's really mind-blowing, you know,
I know
how deeply ingrained these tactics are.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
that's everything.
From the tangible, like the artifacts, to the intangible, like the spiritual core of a culture.
And what's scary is this isn't just ancient history.
Right.
This legacy continues.
It's still happening.
It ripples through us.
In the ways we perceive and interact with ancient Egypt.
Think about Hollywood for a second.
Oh, yeah.
How often do you see ancient Egypt portrayed through this lens of fantasy or horror with white actors?
Yeah.
as Egyptian characters.
It's so frustrating how those stereotypes persist.
I know.
You know, instead of showcasing the richness and complexity,
right.
we get this like simplified, exoticized version.
It's a constant reminder of that othering we talked about.
It's like we're stuck in this loop of misrepresentation.
We are.
And to break free
yeah.
requires us to like
seek out
authentic narrative.
It's about amplifying the voices of Egyptian and African scholars, artists, and storytellers
who have been marginalized for so long.
It's about recognizing that richness and complexity of Kemetic civilization on its own terms.
Not through the lens of those who sought to, you know, control and exploit it.
Right.
And it's not just Hollywood, right?
No.
We see this appropriation happening.
In more subtle ways, too.
Yeah.
Like modern companies using Egyptian imagery.
Oh, yeah. For branding.
Profiting off of culture.
They don't even acknowledge it.
Exactly.
It's cultural appropriation.
In the 21st century.
Still happening.
It makes you wonder, you know, are they doing this just because it looks cool?
And they're trying to capitalize on that mystique.
Without truly understanding or honoring the legacy.
It's a complex issue. It really is.
Yeah, it requires us to be mindful.
Yeah.
Of those power dynamics at play.
Who benefits?
Who's being silenced?
Who's being marginalized?
We have to ask ourselves these questions.
As we navigate this saturated with imagery.
So we've unpacked a lot today.
We have.
You know, from that blatant looting of tombs to the, you know, manipulating the narrative.
The symbols.
And the symbols.
Yeah.
It's clear that the appropriation of ancient Egypt has been multi-layered and deeply impactful.
As we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question.
Okay.
If so much of what we know about ancient Egypt is filtered through this colonial lens, how do we reclaim those authentic Kemetic narratives?
That's a powerful question, and it's one that doesn't have like a simple answer.
But I think part of it is recognizing those biases that are embedded in the traditional narratives and seeking out
alternative perspective.
Yeah, amplifying those voices.
Egyptian and African scholars.
Artists, storytellers.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that history isn't static.
It's constantly being reevaluated and reinterpreted.
And we all have a role to play.
We do.
In making sure those reinterpretations are accurate.
Respectful and inclusive.
So the next time you encounter ancient Egypt, whether it's in a museum or a movie.
Or even a product.
Or an advertisement.
Take a moment. Consider the source.
Question that narrative.
Dig deeper.
Look for diverse perspectives.
Engage with the culture.
On its own terms.
Yeah.
That's a great takeaway for all of us.
It is.
We hope this deep dive has not only informed you,
but also ignited.
A spark of curiosity to continue exploring this topic.
Knowledge is power.
It is.
Understanding the past can help us shape a better future.
Absolutely. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep.